welcome back to Unicorn Dust Designs. If you are new to my channel, my name is Sammy and we do DIYs with signs and there's always tons of laughter. But you guys, instead of seeing me today, it is Spotlight Saturday, so you know what that means. I have another surprise guest and I'm wearing this cheetah shirt because my girl is spicy. I love her. She has such a personality. That is why we get along so well. So I can't wait for you guys to see her and how talented she is. So let's go ahead and get right into this video.
Welcome people. Today I have 8 everyday vintage inspired DIYs for you, showing you some of my favorite ways to create things. 4 can be found right here for Sammy Spotlight Saturday, and the next 4 can be found in a link in the description box over on my channel at the DIY Struggle. For our first project, we find ourselves inside my favorite thrift/consignment store. And for $6.79, I'm pretty sure I can flip this into something beautiful and sell it in my vendor space. I always like to start looking over my pieces to see if there's any lumpy bumpies, stuff I need to fix, things I don't want people to see when I want them to purchase it, you know, all the things. And we're going to use Dixie Belle's White Lightning Cleaner to get rid of any gunk on this project. Now I do put mine in a spray bottle. They do not recommend this, but it works just fine for me. And don't you worry, I'm saving you the cleaning, but I am going to show you that I take 100 grit sandpaper and just give this a little once over, because I am going to be painting most of the projects, so I want the paint to stick. Gotta get that shine off, you know. But first, before we get to the painting, I'm using this folk art crackle, which actually came highly recommended from your girl Sammy here, right here at Unicorn Dust Designs. So I was stoked to be using this. Now by the time you see this video, I am a pro because I've crackled every little thing I can get my hands on because I love it. This was my actual first project that I ever crackled though, so I'm excited to share that here with you. The product is very easy to use and it does not take a long time to dry at all. I am taking and using Dixie Belle's cotton for most of the video. Had to just show you how buttery delicious this stuff is when you open the container. I love Dixie Belle paint. And before I get started, I'm just going to trim off the top because I actually am going to keep the inside of this box black. And we're going to distress it at the end so that black shines through. And we're painting the top of the very bottom over with the cotton, so this is where our crackle is going to shine through and we'll see that black paint come through. I will say one thing I did notice in the process of this is if you go over one section too much, it starts to pull up the crackles. So I had a few sections where you could see that it slid, see right here in the middle. I just went over that with some more paint to cover it up, and I found out later if you put more crackle in there and then put more paint on there, it will still keep crackling. So if that happens to you, hopefully those little tips will help fix your issues. And here's me actually showing you where I'm taking more of the crackle paint in just a few areas that I felt like needed some touch-ups, and then I go over it with the white paint just to be consistent with the crackle look over everything. Once this was completely dry, I picked up some postcards slash actual cards that were in an antique mall by my house, and I had these pieces that I thought would be just perfect with these sceneries on them, and they are actually vintage cardboard type material. They were kind of breaking as I was ripping them. It hurt my feelings just a little bit as I was doing it when I realized like these are just not something you buy off of Amazon. You know what I mean? They're actually really old feeling. So let's take a moment and say goodbye to them. Okay, now for our medium, we're going to use Dixie Belle's clear coat. You can use Mod Podge or even polyacrylic for this part. On projects like this, Dixie Belle clear coat does not really have a smell. And I also know it's going to hold up well on a piece like this when I'm reselling it. So I prefer to use it for this. This is a piece of paper I picked up from Hobby Lobby and I'm just ripping it up. It looks like little written letters all smooshed together on one piece of paper, and I'm tearing it to give our scenery a little bit of a background. These cards were so thick. I usually do not have to use this much Mod Podge or medium or whatever to decoupage anything, but these I had to lather them up so bad to get them to stay on here. I let this completely dry and then grab some paint colors and some stencil. Then I'm taking, this is one of my favorite little stippling brushes. It's actually a makeup brush that I had cut down, and I stipple to, I always feel like a staple. I say it wrong. Different colors to give this a very blended look. And then I carried on doing this throughout the project after I blended in our scenery. This is the artistic part of decoupage that I absolutely love, where you try to make the actual piece you're decoupaging look like one blended unit. And once you get that part where you're happy with it, you can take some stencils, add some layering, make it look more vintage. This is the other side. So for this side, see how there's snow? I took a paintbrush and then blended the snow in from the actual card around the rest of the box and onto where I put the paper with the little letters ripped up on them. And it just turned out so beautiful. You guys have to let me know what you think of this one. Hello people, I'm Brandy, the creator and artist behind the DIY Struggle, and I'm your entertainment this weekend for Sammy's Spotlight Saturday. Here at the DIY Struggle, I do a little bit of everything. From home projects to furniture art, reviews, Dollar Tree DIYs, weekly related browsing videos to help you save, plan, and get inspired for your next project. What I lack in common sense, I make up for in entertainment and artistic ability. At least that's what I tell myself. Sammy, thank you so much for welcoming me into your community and giving me an opportunity to meet your YouTube family. I hope these DIYs do not disappoint. Let's jump into the next one. For this wall decor sconce, you're going to need 9 Dollar Tree palettes, and a staple and some wood glue are going to be the tools of the trade for this project. We're going to start out attaching just 3 at a time because this piece is going to be fairly big, so you want to do it in stages, and I'm making sure to put the wood glue all along the edges or in the seams, just like I'm doing here. Are you watching in the video? Okay. Now, once I get them to this point, we're then going to take our staple and we're going to staple them where they meet together. And we're going to do this for the whole thing, and it's a little time consuming, I'm not going to lie. And if you're wondering what the piece of wood is for, my table is one of them cheap, you know, fabric table joints from somewhere that you use for parties, and that's what I roll with. I stage it, make it look fabulous for all of you to watch me DIY on. And it's not very stable, so that piece of wood helps me make sure that the staples are getting really into the wood. Next, after we have our 3 rows, we are going to make sure they're all even, and we are going to take a popsicle stick and cut 4 nice little clean sections and then staple them where all of these meet. So this way we have one big board or backing, one big backing. Grab your wood glue, smoosh it on all in the parts. So this way there is a bond between the wood pieces and the staples. So once this dries overnight and you come back the next day, it's ready to go. And don't be afraid to put extra pieces around the sides either, because the more staples you have in here, the sturdier this will be and the longer it will last. Now that we have that all completely together, we're going to let that dry and take this beautiful wood mirror piece from an old piece of furniture that I picked up, and we're going to paint it up. And unfortunately, before I paint it up, I didn't rub 2 brain cells together and realized this is going to have some tannins going on, or some bleed through. And protect the piece before I even got started after I cleaned it. So since I didn't do that and use like a 1-2-3 primer spray paint, it was raining that day, so I decided to bust out my Dixie Belle's Boss. This stuff is great to use because it dries clear and you can do little spots. So if you do a piece of furniture and you notice later there's a spot or 2, you can just, you know, rub a little on there or paint a little on there and let it dry, and then just paint your color right over it without having to spray or do or make a whole mess with a whole bunch of product. So I really like this for that. But oh my goodness, people, the yellowing was out of control. Look at how horrible this got. While that's drying, we're going to move on to painting our project, and we're going to use these two pretty colors. If you do not have Dixie Belle products, you can use apple barrel paints as well. Mix them with a little bit of chalk paint if you want that thicker consistency, because sometimes the acrylic paints do take more coats than just a chalk paint, so using a white would work fine to mix those two colors. I have painted hundreds of palettes, and the best way to accomplish this is a spray paint. But if you're going for a weathered look for me, I like to use watered down chalk paints, or mix the chalk paints with some acrylic paints to get desired colors. Purposefully place the paint in the sections you want, and then we're going to wet down our heavy thick white chalk paint and go over in long strokes throughout the whole piece so we don't have any harsh stops. Mostly I skip painting because it's self-explanatory. I do like to show when I'm doing specific techniques. This, however, I wanted to just show you the color variation in the yellow and the white. Bananas, right? Just so crazy that it's so different with the tannins in it. I'm kind of a napkin connoisseur and I love this particular napkin. And since we're going vintage everyday decor in this video, I'm going to rip the napkin in spaces or places that I want to just keep certain little designs of it, and then we're going to pull it apart. A good idea would be to put a little bit of Mod Podge on your fingers to peel that sneaky layer off underneath the top of your napkin, and then we're going to just take a sponge to press down our napkin wherever we want, or in our little mirror frame. Now, if you don't have a mirror frame, you can pick up a regular frame or just skip it all together when you see the end project. You don't have to do this part if you don't want to. I just thought it was an extra nice little touch. Now we're going to take some of this beautiful trim I picked up from Home Depot, and it comes in small sections, but I get the longer ones because I'm constantly building things, and cut it down to size. I'm using my miter shears for this. Now, I do not use miter shears often because sometimes they just don't work out the way you want them to, but for trim and dowels, they work magically. I did happen to cut these frame pieces a little short on their 45-degree angle, so I had to make them even, and with doing that, I had to come in with my frame a little bit around the edges like you see here. It wasn't a huge deal. In the end project, you just don't even care because it's so stunning, but I took wood glue and hot glue, made sure to not overlap the two so it didn't cancel out the bonds. I always like to use wood glue for the immediate hold, and then wood glue or E6000, or a favorite of mine is Gorilla Glue Gel for that long lasting hold, especially when you're selling or giving people things. You just have that fuzzy inside. Know that those glues are going to hold your project together and last. Now that our little decoupage sections are all dry, we're going to just stipple on some colors here just to kind of age it a little bit. And when I do this, I like to go dark first, medium, and then come back with a color that is actually going to blend whatever you're decoupaging in with the furniture or your thrift or your decor piece, so it looks like one cohesive unit. And for this project in particular, we're going to use this color to go back over, and as you can see, it actually is the color of the little vintage design in the napkin. This is a little knob I picked up from Hobby Lobby. For whatever reason, them little stem metal pieces on there, they're always so long, and you never need them that long, and I did not feel like busting out anything to cut it down. So I'm just taking this little metal wire, and we are going to MacGyver together a little piece inside of it with some Gorilla Glue Gel to put through our little holes in our palettes, so we can create this as our hanging mechanism for our beautiful sconce. And let me know what you think about this one. For our next project, we're going to be flipping this little side table. It does have a few little imperfections, nothing huge. We're going to just sand some of that down and put a primer on it. But first, we're going to have to clean this up. Now, I'm not going to show you every little bit, but I do want to show you why it's important to clean your pieces. See this wonderful yellow pool of bleh. Yeah, that's coming off the table, and I'm putting my teenager to work here cleaning it off, but look at this towel, just hideous. Once it dried off, I then took some sandpaper and went over the raised pieces and around the edges to just give it a nice little sand so we make sure that our paint is going to stick here, and cleaned it off with a microfiber cloth. This is hands down my favorite primer. Now, I don't like the paint form, but I love the spray paint form. And for all you spray paint lovers, a little ASMR for you. I got your back. Once that dried, I'm taking this gold metallic and going over just the edges of everything. The video does this absolutely no justice for how beautiful this color is. Again, I'm just doing the edges because this is actually going to show through our crackle. Yep, we're going to crackle this too. We are going to use the same crackle paint, and we're going around all the edges of this piece, and we're going to let this dry. Once the crackle is dry, we're going to then come in with our Dixie Bell Cotton. You can use whatever paint you want to use, but I'm using white to go over this beautiful gold crackle medium color thing that we have going on here. And I'm doing it in like strokes. Remember, this paint will pull the crackle off, or the crackle gets pulled off. I'm not sure if it's the paint's fault, the brush's fault, the artist's fault, somebody, but the crackle does, you know, space a little bit, which I'm showing you here. So you need to be mindful as you're pulling it. And if you're mindful, it works out just fine. But sometimes I get a little extra and I'm like, oh, let's keep painting. We don't want to do that, okay? But if you do, here's how you fix it. Again, remember, I said I'm going to have used this crackle paint a lot by the time you see this video, and I'm a professional at this point. Not really, but you know what I mean. A little bit of the paint, just to kind of dry brush side to side, and it covers it right up and still looks very vintage and worn and just gorgeous. For the sections that you want to kind of go over, just make sure you do not have a lot of paint, and it will not completely cover up your crackle paint. Make sure the brush is a little bit more drier than it is wet. Once the table is all dry, you're ready to decoupage. Well, you're ready to leave it alone if you want, but I'm going to decoupage this beautiful rice paper I picked up off Amazon onto the top, and I have a big piece to go onto the bottom using polyacrylic to accomplish that. I like to use this on tables or furniture or dresser pieces, especially on the tops, because it just holds up really well, especially if people are sitting cups or things down on top of something. You want to make sure it has the best protective finish that you possibly can, and I just really have had good results, and no one that I have sold pieces to has complained to me, so I continue to, you know, roll on with it. Whenever I'm using napkins or anything thin like this rice paper, I like to use the sponge. It helps to kind of grab any of the extra that is coming through the napkin or the thin product, and it also just helps to keep a flawless finish. And as you're rubbing the sponge down, it's not typical that it tears, so just be mindful with it and press as you go, and it works out really well for me, and I like to give this little tip to others as they go along their journey. This, believe it or not, this piece of paper is what inspired the entire vintage idea for me. The everyday vintage decor idea for me. I love it. My mother is a huge horse fan, and she loves horses, and I was inspired to do it. It's funny where you get inspired from in this piece of paper. Also, fan brushes. Look at this. See how I can squeeze it underneath of there? I like using these to check my napkins and decoupage papers around the edges, because if you don't have enough sealer on them, this little fan brush will be able to squeeze right in there, and if you do, it won't. Lastly, we have to tie it all in because we don't want it just abruptly sitting on our table and not making sense. So I'm taking the colors that are closest to matching what is already in our decoupage rice paper, and I'm just blotting around the areas and stippling or blotting, whatever, stipple, blot, okay. And we're making sure that they're dry so this way that they don't blend. You can blend if you want to, but for this particular look, I did not want them to blend together. I wanted them to have their own identity. And bring in the crackle back in because we have to make sure that these paints crackle and have that vintage look just like the whole project. So we take a little bit of the crackle over the colored paint, and then we come back in with our white, very thin layers going over the whole thing, not completely over our rice paper to blend out our actual prints, but just enough to make sure it looks like one cohesive piece. For our wall art, we are going to need to cut 4 pieces of 1x3 down to about 20-ish inches. You can do this whatever size you want. It just depends on how big of a piece you're creating. And then we're going to beat this. We're going to beat the board, beat it up, beat it all kinds of ways. So it has all kinds of dents and wear and marks in it. And then we're going to glue the boards together. And I did cut the boards uneven, so this way it didn't look purposefully neat. It looked older and vintage-ish. I do recommend once you have all these pieces together, putting some staples in the back of your project and then clamping all of them together and letting this dry for 24 hours. Or at least overnight, because you're going to be pressing on this project, so trying to just jump right into it after 30 minutes, it's not a good idea. Look at our beautiful stencil. I ordered this off Amazon. This is fairly big. We're just going to use half of it. And then to start out, we're going to trace the inside of the stencil very lightly. You don't have to press hard. And then we're going to water down and create our own stains. You're welcome to use regular stain if you want. I don't really like the smells, so I will water down acrylic paint, or right here we're using antique Waverly wax and it's watered down with a paintbrush. And we are going to paint around all the sections that we did not trace. And we're going to be very detailed with a tiny little brush, and make sure you're moving it around, because if you're not, it's going to leave clumps in little sections, and we don't want that. We want it to be very blended like the wood is stained. And by the time we're all done, the silhouette of our stencil is going to be completely traced out, leaving the actual stencil there for us to be able to see. I absolutely love creating stencil art. This is something that is so true to who I am as an artist, and I love sharing this when I get the opportunity. Plus, I like showing it for those who are not that great at drawing or painting, because you can use stencils for this instead of freehand, or you can freehand them on here if you want and draw your own pictures and then do the same technique. Once you have your stain completely colored in, like I'm going around here and just blending it in with a microfiber cloth, still using the antique Waverly wax, you're then going to erase your pencil because you don't want anybody knowing that you traced it on there, right? So you're going to erase your pencil and you're going to come in with your paint colors. And these colors really just depend on you, but I wanted to keep it very natural looking, also with the theme of the colors that we had going on in this video today. And we're going to use a little stippling technique. We're going to use a little finger rubbing technique, and we're going to use some blending. I do not completely color this in like a stencil when I do this. I actually leave a lot of it empty and blend in the paint with the color of the wood. So you'll have your stain, the wood color, and then you'll have the different colors of the stencil to kind of just pull in that piece, creating a really artistic piece when you're done. Once I get my stencil on there and I've kind of rubbed in as much paint as I want to be on there, this is where I decide whether I'm going to take the stencil off and then just start freehanding pieces. And yes, people, I can actually draw and do all of this without the stencil. But part of the DIY struggle is to show you guys how to create things at home for yourself and be budget friendly. So using a stencil is the easiest way to create this kind of stain art. If you're going to just stencil it on there, I wouldn't even bother doing the tracing and leaving the natural wood color. Just go right ahead and stencil right over whatever color you stained your wood. The only way that this really works best is if you kind of leave the natural wood exposed in the sections you plan on painting and using more stain and blending, so it kind of all just looks like it's blended into the wood naturally. And once this was all done off camera, I added some little extra highlights in there, and that's going to be it for this one. Sammy, thank you so much for having me for your Spotlight Saturday. I hope your community enjoyed these DIYs. People, thank you for hanging out with me. If you did enjoy these DIYs, don't forget I have 4 more for you in a video down in the description box. Just click the link and it will take you on over to the DIY struggle for you to enjoy the rest of them.
All right, you guys. So as you've learned, that was Brandy from the DIY struggle. And if you don't know why I love her from watching that, then we can't be friends. I mean, we just can't, because her personality, her editing skills on her videos, and then of course her creativity is just off the charts. Like, I learned so much from every video I watch of hers, and that's why I wanted to share her with you guys. So you guys know the drill. Go down in the description box, click the link, because she's gonna have another 4 projects for you to watch right now. And then make sure to like and subscribe to her channel, show her love, let her know what you liked, and then make sure to do the same down in my comments. Let me know what you enjoyed from her style of crafting, and then make sure you like and make sure you subscribe my video, because it lets YouTube know you guys are digging me and you're digging the channel, and then they'll share it out to the rest of the world. Yeah, those aren't going away anytime soon. All right, you guys, thank you guys for joining me today, and we will be back here next week. Bye. I swear. At this point, I will have already had baby M. Isn't that crazy? That's